Judge mocks teenager in court. Shocked to learn he's a genius attorney in disguise. Judge Harrison leaned forward, peering down at the teenage defendant with unconcealed disdain. You think the law is Mr. Reynolds? He smirked, drawing scattered laughter from the courtroom. This isn't a high school debate club. You're facing serious charges. Tyler Reynolds, 18 and dressed in a worn blazer 2 sizes too big, stood unflinching, his eyes sharp and calculating, locked with the judge's. With all due respect, Your Honor, he replied, voice steady despite the tension. I believe you've just violated the Sixth Amendment. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong in spectacular fashion? This story of an unlikely legal prodigy will make you question your assumptions about youth, justice, and the power of preparation. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The Los Angeles County Courthouse fell silent. Judge Harrison Porter's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned indignation. The prosecutor, Vanessa Chen, rose halfway from her seat, mouth slightly agape. Even the bailiff stopped his casual lean against the wall. Excuse me. Judge Porter's voice had dropped an octave. Dangerous now. Tyler Reynolds didn't flinch. He stood at the defendant's table, hands clasped behind his back. At 18, he looked almost comically out of place in the grand courtroom with its polished oak panels and stern portraits of justices past. His thrift store blazer hung from his slender frame, and his khaki pants were an inch too short, revealing mismatched socks. But his posture remained perfect, his gaze unwavering. The Sixth Amendment guarantees my right to know the nature and cause of accusations against me, Tyler said, his voice remarkably composed. You just stated you're not wasting the court's time with trivial legalities, and suggested we get this over with before you've allowed my counsel to present any arguments. That's a clear violation of due process. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Porter's face flushed crimson. Mr. Reynolds, I advise you to let your attorney do the talking. This kind of disrespect. It's not disrespect to cite the Constitution, Your Honor, Tyler interrupted, causing several gasps from the spectators. And since we're discussing representation, I'd like to exercise my right to represent myself. His public defender, Lisa Morales, turned to him with wide eyes. Tyler, we discussed this. Ms. Morales has been incredibly helpful, Tyler said, offering her a small nod. But I'm prepared to handle my defense. Judge Porter leaned back, a hint of amusement returning to his features. You'll understand you're facing grand theft auto charges. This isn't a traffic ticket. I am well aware of the charges, Your Honor. I'm also aware that they're completely unfounded. The prosecutor, Miss Chen, finally found her voice. Your Honor, this is absurd. The defendant is 18 years old with no legal training. The state opposes this request. Judge Porter studied Tyler for a long moment, then shrugged. Mr. Reynolds, while I question your judgment, you have the right to represent yourself after a proper Ferretta inquiry. However, I strongly advise against it. Ms. Morales is an experienced attorney. Tyler nodded respectfully to his public defender. I appreciate her expertise, but I'll proceed pro se. Very well. Judge Porter sighed, already imagining the appellate issues. Let the record reflect that the defendant has chosen to represent himself after being advised of the risks. Ms. Chen, you may proceed with opening statements. Vanessa Chen approached the jury box with confident strides, her navy suit impeccable, her posture projecting authority. At 35, she had already built a reputation as one of the DA's most ruthless prosecutors, with a conviction rate that made defense attorneys cringe. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her voice carrying through the courtroom. This case is straightforward. On the night of March 3rd, a 2022 Audi A8 was reported stolen from the parking lot of Westfield Mall. Security footage shows someone matching the defendant's description entering the vehicle. At 11:47 p.m., officers spotted the stolen vehicle and initiated a pursuit. The defendant abandoned the car near Wilshire Boulevard, and attempted to flee on foot. When apprehended, he had the car keys in his possession, and his fingerprints were found throughout the vehicle. She paused, letting her words settle over the jury. The evidence is irrefutable. Tyler Reynolds stole that car, led police on a dangerous chase, and now wants you to believe it's all a misunderstanding. Don't be fooled by his youth or his amateur legal maneuvers. The facts speak for themselves. With a satisfied nod, she returned to her seat. Several jurors nodded along with her, already convinced. Judge Porter turned to Tyler. "Mr. Reynolds, your opening statement?" Tyler stood slowly, buttoning his oversized blazer. The courtroom waited, many expecting a stumbling, nervous performance. What they got was something entirely different. "The prosecution is correct about one thing," he began, his voice clear and measured. "This case is straightforward, but not in the way Ms. Chen suggests." He approached the jury, making eye contact with each member. "This is of mistaken identity, rushed conclusions, and evidence that will fall apart under scrutiny." He walked slowly, his hands making small, precise gestures. "Yes, an Audi was stolen on March 3rd. Yes, someone was arrested near Wilshire Boulevard. But that person wasn't the car thief, and the prosecution knows it. By the end of this trial, you'll see that the state's case is built on assumptions rather than facts. You'll learn that the security footage Ms. Chen mentioned shows someone who shares only the most superficial resemblance to me. You'll discover that my fingerprints were in that car because I had been in it earlier that day, with the owner's permission." The jurors exchanged glances. Judge Porter's brow furrowed. "Most importantly," Tyler continued, "you'll learn that I was at the public library until 10:30 p.m. that night, studying for my AP exams, with multiple witnesses and electronic records to prove it. The alleged theft occurred at 10:15 p.m., making it physically impossible for me to have committed this crime." He returned to his table, gathering his notes. "The burden of proof rests with the prosecution, and their burden is heavy, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. When all evidence is presented, that doubt won't just linger. It will overwhelm the prosecution's case entirely. Thank you." As Tyler sat down, the courtroom remained utterly silent. Judge Porter cleared his throat, visibly reassessing the teenager before him. "Ms. Chen, call your first witness." The prosecutor stood, her confident smile now slightly strained. "The state calls Officer James Wilkins." A uniformed police officer approached the stand, was sworn in, and settled into the witness chair. His posture was rigid, his expression neutral. "Officer Wilkins, please describe the events of March 3rd, Chen prompted. "At approximately 11:40 p.m., dispatch alerted us to a stolen vehicle in our vicinity, a black Audi 8. My partner and I spotted it on Olympic Boulevard running a red light. We initiated pursuit with lights and sirens, but the driver accelerated, reaching speeds of over 70 miles per hour in a 35 zone. What happened next?" Chen asked. "The suspect abandoned the vehicle near Wilshire and attempted to flee on foot. I pursued while my partner secured the vehicle. I apprehended the suspect." He pointed at Tyler, approximately 2 blocks away. He was out of breath, sweating, and had the car keys in his pocket. "Did the defendant say anything upon arrest?" "He claimed he was just walking home from the library. Said we had the wrong guy." Chen nodded, satisfied. No further questions. Judge Porter turned to Tyler. "Your cross-examination, Mr. Reynolds." Tyler approached the witness stand, his demeanor calm but focused. "Officer Wilkins, what was the lighting like in the area where you apprehended me?" The officer shifted slightly. "It was dark. Streetlights, but some were out. So, not ideal conditions for visual identification." "I could see well enough." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "You testified that the suspect was running from the scene. What was I doing when you found me?" Officer Wilkins hesitated. "You were walking quickly. Walking, not running. Do you recall what I was carrying?" Another pause. "You had a backpack." "Yes. A backpack full of library books, textbooks, and study materials. Did you document these items in your report? I don't recall specifically." Tyler approached the evidence table. "I'd like to refer to Exhibit D, Officer Wilkins' arrest report." He handed a document to the officer. "Could you please read item 7 on the inventory list?" Officer Wilkins squinted at the paper. One backpack containing 5 library books, 2 notebooks, calculator, pencil case. "Thank you. Now, you mentioned finding car keys in my possession. Could you describe these keys?" "Standard car key fob for an Audi." Tyler pulled a document from his file. I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit A, the property records for the stolen vehicle." "Officer Wilkins, could you please read the highlighted section regarding the keys?" The officer took the document. Vehicle was accessed and started using the owner's phone app. No physical keys were reported missing. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Tyler allowed it to settle before continuing. "Officer Wilkins, if the car was started using a phone app and no physical keys were missing, how do you explain finding Audi keys in my possession?" The officer's face reddened. They must have been in the car. But if they were in the car, why would the thief take them when abandoning the vehicle? And more importantly, why wasn't this discrepancy noted in your report?" "I can't say for certain. One final question. Did you personally see the driver of the stolen vehicle?" "No. My partner had visual contact first." "Thank you, officer. No further questions." As Tyler returned to his seat, Judge Porter studied him with growing interest. The prosecutor's confidence had visibly diminished. The trial progressed through the afternoon, each prosecution witness facing Tyler's unexpectedly skilled cross-examination. When the state's forensic technician took the stand to discuss fingerprint evidence, the gallery watched in fascination as the teenager dismantled her testimony. "So, to clarify," Tyler said, pacing slowly before the witness stand, "you found my fingerprints on the passenger door handle, the glove compartment, and the dashboard, but not on the steering wheel, gear shift, or driver's side door." The technician nodded. "That's correct. Would that pattern be consistent with someone who rode in the car as a passenger but didn't drive it?" "Yes, it would." "Thank you." No further questions. By the time Judge Porter called for the day's recess, the mood in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, and whispers circulated through the gallery. Tyler packed his notes methodically into his worn backpack, seemingly oblivious to the stares. In the courthouse hallway, his mother waited, her face lined with worry. Elaine Reynolds worked 2 jobs to support her son. Days as a paralegal at a small law firm and evenings waiting tables. Her suit was simple but neat, her only concession to the gravity of the proceedings. "How did it go?" she asked, pulling him into a tight hug. "Better than they expected," Tyler replied with a small smile. "But tomorrow's the real test." As they walked toward the exit, Prosecutor Chen watched them from a distance, her expression troubled. Beside her stood a man in an expensive suit. Marcus Blackwell, the owner of the stolen Audi. "I thought you said this would be straightforward," Blackwell muttered. "The kid's making your office look incompetent." Chen's jaw tightened. "It's still under control. We haven't played all our cards yet. You'd better not mess this up. I can't afford any more scrutiny about that night." "Keep your voice down," Chen hissed. "Just stick to your statement and we'll handle the rest." Neither noticed Judge Porter pausing at the water fountain nearby, his brow furrowing as he overheard their exchange. The next morning, Tyler arrived early, reviewing his notes at the defense table. Judge Porter entered, giving the teenager a contemplative look before calling the court to order. "Miss Chen, call your next witness. The state calls Marcus Blackwell." As the Audi's owner took the stand, Tyler studied him carefully. Blackwell was in his 40s, expensively dressed, with the confident demeanor of someone used to authority. After establishing Blackwell's ownership of the vehicle, Chen moved to the night in question. "Mr. Blackwell, when did you discover your car was missing?" "Around 10:30 p.m. I exited the mall and found my parking space empty." "Did you immediately report it stolen?" "Yes, I called the police right away." "Do you recognize the defendant?" Blackwell looked directly at Tyler. "Yes, he's the same kid I saw loitering near my car earlier that evening, around 8 p.m. Chen nodded, satisfied. No further questions. Tyler approached the witness stand, his expression neutral. "Mr. Blackwell, you testified that you saw me loitering near your car at approximately 8 p.m. Could you describe exactly what I was doing? Blackwell shifted slightly. You were hanging around looking at the car, acting suspicious. Could you be more specific about what made my behavior suspicious? You kept looking around, like you were making sure no one was watching. Then you tried the door handle. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Blackwell, are you aware that the mall's security cameras cover that parking area? A flicker of unease crossed Blackwell's face. I assume they do. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit B, security footage from Westfield Mall on March 3rd, time-stamped between 7:45 and 8:15 p.m. Judge Porter nodded. Proceed. A court technician set up the video, and the courtroom watched as grainy footage showed Tyler approaching the Audi. He was clearly visible, wearing the same clothes he had on during his arrest. But rather than loitering, the video showed him walking directly to the car, opening the passenger door with ease, retrieving something from inside, and walking away, all within 30 seconds. Mr. Blackwell, does that footage match your description of my behavior? Blackwell's face hardened. The angle must be misleading. The angle clearly shows me retrieving my calculus textbook from your car, which I had left there earlier that day. Would you like me to explain why my textbook was in your vehicle? Objection, Chen interjected. Relevance. Your Honor, Tyler countered. This directly addresses the witness's credibility and explains the fingerprint evidence. Overruled. The witness will answer. Blackwell glared at Tyler. I have no idea why your book would be in my car. Then allow me to refresh your memory. Your daughter, Emma Blackwell, is my classmate. She offered me a ride to school that morning when she saw me waiting at the bus stop in the rain. I accidentally left my textbook in her car. Your car, which explains why my fingerprints were found inside. I went to the mall that evening specifically to retrieve it, after Emma texted me that the car would be there. He produced a phone, opening a text message chain. I'd like to enter this conversation as Defense Exhibit C, as the evidence was marked, Tyler continued. Mr. Blackwell, when did you give your statement to the police about seeing me loitering? The night of the theft. Interesting. Because according to the police report, you initially stated that you didn't see anyone suspicious near the vehicle. This statement about me loitering wasn't added until 3 days later. Can you explain that discrepancy? Blackwell's composure cracked slightly. I remembered it later. Tyler nodded, then took a calculated risk. Mr. Blackwell, where were you between 10:15 and 10:30 p.m. on March 3rd? Objection. Chen shot to her feet. The witness is not on trial here. Your Honor, Tyler said calmly, I'm establishing an alternative theory of the crime, which is my right as the defendant. Judge Porter studied Tyler for a moment. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Reynolds. Tyler turned back to Blackwell. Let me rephrase. The mall's security footage shows you exiting at 9:47 p.m., not 10:30 as you testified. Your car remains in the parking lot until 10:17 p.m. when it's driven away, not by someone matching my description, but by someone in a hooded sweatshirt whose face isn't visible. Can you explain this discrepancy? Blackwell's face drained of color. The courtroom held its collective breath. I don't have to answer these accusations, Blackwell snapped. Tyler pressed further. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit D. Bank records subpoenaed from Casino Royale showing Mr. Blackwell lost over $200,000 at their tables in February, followed by Defense Exhibit E, an insurance claim filed on March 4th for the stolen claim. Audi, valued at $92,000. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Porter banged his gavel for order. Mr. Blackwell, Tyler continued, his voice steady, did you stage the theft of your own vehicle for the insurance money? Then allow the prosecution to frame me when I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? This is outrageous, Chen exclaimed, but her protest lacked conviction. Blackwell stood abruptly. I want a lawyer. Judge Porter's expression darkened. Sit down, Mr. Blackwell. You're still under oath. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right, Blackwell said stiffly. The judge turned to the jury. The witness has invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The court will take a 15-minute recess. As the courtroom cleared, Judge Porter motioned for Tyler to approach the bench. Chen joined them, her face ashen. "Mr. Reynolds," the judge said quietly, "I suspect there's more to your story than an innocent teenager with an unexpected legal aptitude. Care to enlighten me?" Tyler hesitated, then nodded. "My mother has been a paralegal at Davidson and Morris for 12 years. I've spent most afternoons since I was 10 in their law library. The senior partners let me sit in on case preparations, mock trials, and depositions. I've read every major case study in criminal law since Marbury v. Madison, and the public defender charade. I wanted to see how the system would treat someone they thought was just another teenager in trouble. When I realized they were trying to railroad me despite the evidence, I decided to represent myself." Judge Porter's lips twitched. "Ms. Chen, I believe we need to discuss the state's position on this case." When court resumed, the transformation was complete. Chen stood, her voice subdued. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Reynolds." Judge Porter nodded. Motion granted. "Mr. Reynolds, you are free to go." He paused, then added, "The court will be referring Mr. Blackwell's case to the district attorney for potential insurance, fraud, and perjury charges." As the gallery erupted in conversation, Tyler gathered his materials. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find Judge Porter standing beside him. "Harvard Law is still accepting applications for the fall," the judge said quietly. "I'd be happy to write a recommendation," Tyler smiled. "Yale, actually. I've already been accepted." Harrison Porter laughed for the first time in the proceedings. "Of course you have." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Tyler and his mother. Through the crowd, he spotted Lisa Morales, the public defender, giving him a thumbs up. Beyond her stood Officer Wilkins, his expression a mix of embarrassment and grudging respect. "Tyler, how does it feel to have the charges dismissed? Were you scared taking on the case yourself? What's next for you?" Tyler raised a hand, quieting the questions. "The only thing that matters is that justice was served today, eventually. But we should all be concerned about how easily that justice could have been denied. How many others without my background face similar circumstances every day in our courts?" His mother squeezed his arm, proud tears in her eyes. As they navigated through the crowd, Tyler saw Prosecutor Chen speaking intensely with her supervisor. When she caught his eye, he gave her a small nod. Not of forgiveness, but acknowledgement. They both knew the system needed to change. That night, as Tyler hung his blazer back in the closet, he reflected on the day's events. The case had been a test, not just of his knowledge, but of his convictions. He'd entered the courtroom as a defendant and emerged as something else entirely, a future advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Impressive work today. Not many people make me reconsider my assumptions." Judge Porter Tyler smiled. Perhaps change was possible, one courtroom at a time. "Did this story make you think about how we judge people based on appearances? The legal system isn't perfect, but awareness is the first step toward change. Share this story with someone who appreciates that justice should be blind to age, background, and assumptions. Together, we can create a system that truly works for everyone." As Tyler prepared for bed, his mother knocked softly on his door. "I never doubted you for a second," she said, sitting beside him. "But I was terrified the whole time." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry about that part." She shook her head. "Don't be. You exposed something important today. Your father would have been so proud." Tyler nodded, throat tight. His father, a public defender who died when Tyler was 9, had instilled in him a deep respect for justice and the law. It was his father's books Tyler had first devoured, his father's cases he had studied. "Get some rest," his mother said, kissing his forehead. "Yale won't know what hit them." After she left, Tyler opened his laptop, starting a document he titled Systemic Failures. Case Study #1. He began typing, documenting every flaw in the process that had nearly convicted an innocent person. This wouldn't be his last case, just the first of many. Are you inspired by Tyler's story? Remember that real change happens when we challenge broken systems instead of accepting them. Like this story if you believe in fighting for justice, even when you're underestimated. And remember, sometimes the most powerful voices come from those we least expect to speak up.